Well, good morning, everybody. We have a special guest today, Shane Wenzel from Shane Homes. And this introduction was made actually and suggested by a couple of close friends of mine, including my husband, who have been following Shane for some time and thought it would be fantastic for both him and I to get together in a very fun discussion about some political topics and others. And really, when I looked at Shane's website and his videos and commentary, I was really quite impressed to find another Albertan businessman in particular who had an opinion on things. So it is my pleasure this morning to introduce to you Shane Wenzel. Morning, Shane. How are you?
Good, Nadine. How are you?
Good. Why
Besides a few
don't
technical issues.
It's really funny. I used to own an aerospace and defense company, and I literally
Hmm.
have worked with rocket scientists, and people are always shocked at how incompetent I am when things actually go wrong with technology. I can use it, but don't ask me to fix it. It's like it's supposed to do
Hmm.
its part.
I'm the same way. Thank God for IT here.
Wonderful. Well, why don't you just give us a quick introduction to who you are? And I'm really curious to kind of jump into a little bit about why you decided to take to social media.
Okay. Well, as you said, my name is Shane Wenzel. I'm the president and CEO of the Shane Homes group of companies now. And God, I've been in home building since I was very, very young. I started on the job sites when I was 14 and progressed into the office at some point, working under my father, Cal, and it's been a rocket ride for the last 35 years doing this job and learning more about the business and watching how it's evolved over the last 35 years. So it's been fun and it's been challenging at times, especially when you're working in a family-based business. We love each other. We love to hate each other at times, but for the most part, we get along, and that's created to the success of everything that we have here today.
Sounds like a strong conservative family. We love to hate each other at times, but we're still
Oh yeah.
family.
Well, I mean, I have two very entrepreneurial parents, Cal and Edith, and you can imagine being the youngest in the family. The kind of conversations we used to have around the kitchen table at dinner time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now you have been on social media for a little while. And
Oh God,
what
yeah.
most business people I find, especially here in Calgary, conservatives in general, tend to shy away from sharing their opinions, their thoughts, because they don't want to upset anybody. They don't want to impact their business. They don't want it to make it seem like, they're choosing one side over another and for all these things. And yet here you are.
Yeah, here I am. You know how that started was very simple. I mean, we had seen how social media affected the Calgary municipal election back in 2010. So I decided to hop on and learn a little bit more about it. And it really wasn't my intent to, I guess, to stay on. It was just to try and understand what was going on and how this all worked. And it just kind of blossomed from there. I mean, I started on Twitter. I eventually ended up on LinkedIn, and on a dare by my son, I ended up on Instagram, and it kept kind of snowballing from there. And it was more of a part time fun kind of thing to do. And when we hit lockdowns back in 2020, you're at home, you're bored, you're looking for things to do. So I started fiddling around a little bit more, and at the encouragement of a friend and now my producer, he encouraged me to do videos, which I honestly wasn't that comfortable with at the time. He did it more because of boredom, and the platform just kind of grew.
I love it. I did it on a dare and I got bored, so
Yeah,
had to
I
fill
did it
in the
on a dare. I
time.
got bored, and here we are today, and now I need help with it. So,
Awesome. Well, I have a quick question for you because I've watched a number
mhm.
of your videos, and
Yeah.
are there any political aspirations? Because I'll tell you, when you talk about your rants, okay, everybody get prepared. I'm going on a rant. It is very grounded. When I go on a rant, it's not that grounded. I've got that little bit more of that fire and air that comes out, and
Yeah.
it's throw caution to the wind. You are very, methodical, and you're very, and I'm like, oh, there's a guy who's got some, political kind of aspiration and would do well in politics.
Yeah, I've been asked that question a few times before, and really, there are no political aspirations. I just like sharing my opinion. There, and to your comment earlier, why aren't others doing it? I asked the same question. Why aren't they doing it? I mean, all you're doing is sharing your opinion. Are you really afraid of people not supporting your business? They're not going to do it regardless. So what are you worried about? I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and how you express it is really what I think is more meaningful at the end of the day.
Hmm. No, absolutely. Well, like I said, and I always look at people's intentions, and where their heart is. My mouth often says stuff that's going on in my brain that maybe it shouldn't, but at, but my heart, I think, is in the right place, and it is about, Albertans and Canadians in general, and about people, and about doing what's right for people and what's best for people. And I think when I watched a lot of your stuff, it really came across. It was just a very different kind of delivery, and I
Hmm.
went, yeah, you'd make a great politician. That very calm, methodical, nothing really kind of, seems to get you really riled up. Although there's been some, nice progression, I think, from the gay redneck days of the social media. I looked at that title and I went, what the heck? It was like, there's somebody who's like, willing to put it out there and
Yeah.
call it what it is. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, again, that stems from a lot of boredom during lockdowns, and it's like, okay, let's have fun with this at the same time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if you're up for it, I'd like to talk about some of the different topics that you've kind of touched on a little bit, and just bring
Certainly.
them into how, some of the things that are going on today as well. Like you've talked about a broad variety of subjects, business related, as to, firing people, as well as,
Mhm.
politics, and what to look for in an MLA, and, who to vote for, why you would vote for that, which I thought was excellent.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that are on your mind today that probably have got you more concerned, or that you're following closely? I know the list is probably
Well,
like very long, right? I should have narrowed that down some.
I mean, there's always a lot of political subjects. There's obviously housing related issues, which I guess tie back into politics, and then there's that self improvement aspect that I enjoy talking about, and it's really just relating to experiences that I have or thoughts that I have on specific subjects. But I guess what catches my attention lately is we're into the federal politic game, and how it greatly affects this country.
Yeah,
It's
you
concerning.
published the call in election. I guess you'd done a little poll, and you said 93% were in support of an election.
Sure. I mean, that's just a general X poll, but I mean, it went across a broad spectrum. I think it probably had 20,000 people vote on it. So, I mean, give or take, there's always a following that I have that are probably more conservative leaning and wanting to see an election. But when it's that overwhelming at 93%, even if you cut it right down the middle, I mean, the vast majority of people still want to see an election in this country, and I think that's representative of all the polling that you've seen for the past 14, 15 months. People are dissatisfied with the federal government that they have right now. They don't like the direction it's going in, and you know, Canadians are demanding a change.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I've come across even some of my conservative friends who, we kind of have a little bit of a difference of opinion, I think, as to when this election is going to get called. I don't
Mhm.
think personally Mark Carney has any intention of calling an election anytime
Mhm.
soon. And now I did have some people say, okay, from a war chest money perspective, there might be some reasons why they might want to. call it a little bit early because they don't have any money, the Liberal Party. Shocking, because they probably spent it. I mean, balance,
Mhm.
budgets balance themselves after all. But
If only they did,
oh
then
gosh.
none of us would have an issue.
Well, hey, we just print more money, Shane. That's all we
Yeah.
do. We just print more money. Keep printing. Like there's no impact to printing more money. So, but
Hmm.
my thoughts around that is that I don't personally think we're going to see an election in 2025. I think Mark Carney is going to come in, take over. He will be the dictator, PM, and continue the agenda and the destruction of Canada, which the Liberal Party has done so well doing. And then
Hmm.
we won't see an election probably till, I'm guessing they'll drag it out to do as much damage as they can till 2026. What are your thoughts? Do you think we're going to see an election sooner, or do you think Mark Carney will probably try and put that off as long as possible?
Well, I mean, I've looked at all aspects of it myself, and I tend to think that they might call an election right away, and only because their polling numbers seem to show that they've made up some ground on the Conservative Party.
So you think,
I don't know if extending that out will help them in any regard, but it's not impossible because you can backtrack on all the poor policy that they've added on over the last 9.5 years. It's just ironic, isn't it, that they're backtracking on everything. I mean, it's almost an admission that we've made a lot of mistakes.
yeah, I just don't think they're sincere in that admission, and I don't think they'll backtrack on anything.
No,
Carney's idea of getting rid of the carbon tax is literally we'll just call it something different and we'll
we'll just
implement
move it over
something
to.
that's actually better. And when he means better, meaning like probably more taxation for the Canadian people. And, he was the architect of the
Hmm.
Green, New Deal, really. But
Yes.
I think the only reason I could see them maybe calling an election, as you pointed out, is they have gained some seats back in Ontario in particular. And I think largely because people don't know who Mark Carney actually is.
Hmm.
You think Justin Trudeau is bad for this country. I think Mark Carney is far worse and far more dangerous because he is more sophisticated and he is smarter
Hmm.
than Justin Trudeau ever could dream to or hope to be. But
Well,
yeah, so
that
maybe a
goes without saying.
minority. Yeah, maybe a minority liberal government, and then they'll do a coalition, kind of same thing that they've done here with either the Bloc or the NDP that have propped up this liberal government for so long now. But
Well,
fair
they would
enough.
have to go with the Bloc because that's where the Liberals appear to be taking a lot of seats, is they're taking them away from the NDP.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that strange?
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. The policy is too closely aligned with the NDP party for a number of years. I think that's why Jagmeet kept propping up the Liberal government. What it's actually kind of comical, because Jagmeet seemed to think that he was going to gain a bunch by just not supporting this non-confidence vote, and here they are, half of what they were even 2 3 months ago. It's talk about blowing it for your party.
Yeah, I don't really see Jagmeet getting reelected or having a strong presence. I mean, I always tell people socialism. It doesn't matter whether you're liberal or whether you're NDP or Green. They're really just branches of the same tree, with the same root. So, if people get upset, isn't it funny that I find conservatives will just, not vote, or, they might even do a protest vote, but
Mhm.
that would never happen under the socialist side of the house, right? It's like they would
Oh
never
no.
think to ever vote for a conservative, but they have no problem switching back and forth amongst their own. That's for sure.
Well, and that's what we're witnessing now. And I only hope. Well, I mean, even if I go back to your original question, I mean, what would be better? God, I don't want to see it stretched out to October 2026. I don't think anybody does. Like, can we end the pain now and just go into an election and see a change? And I think you'll still see a change. I think you'll still see a conservative government. Because I'm a little suspect of some of the polling out there, as I think a lot of people are. You know, uh, But I mean, we've seen it happen, south of us here in the United States, where Kamala Harris was supposed to be anointed, and what you found out was a complete opposite with Trump.
Well, let's go back to the Hillary Clinton days of, it was a runaway. There was no
Oh
way. It
yeah,
was impossible for Trump to have gotten elected in 2015, only to find out when it was like, oh my gosh, what happened? All those closet Trump supporters obviously showed up on election day. So, no,
yes,
I certainly don't trust the media either, although I do find that surprisingly enough, the polls in Canada that I've been a part of haven't actually been as distorted as
hmm
I would have actually liked them to have been, to be honest. I find they're a little too accurate. Thus, when it shows that Carney is won back 20 seats, that does sort of, shake me a little bit, going, oh, really? I can't believe people are falling for this.
well, and I think that's the challenge you run into. I mean, I think it's a relatively proven fact now that about 90% of people, they're not engaged in any politics of any form. They essentially make a decision, 5 minutes before they hit the ballot box as to who they're going to vote for. But isn't it a shame? 9.5 years of, again, bad policy on top of even worse policy, and here we are faced with, possibly the same outcome that's led us to this point. And even I'm shocked that people can forget so easily, but it's been known to happen.
Yeah, regrettably. So you had talked, in one of your videos about some of the things that you would like to see this next government do federally, including
Mhm.
defund the CBC, maybe take a
Automatic.
review of the Income Tax Act, because Chris Canadians, you know what, on the Income Tax Act one, let's talk about this one because it kind of comes into
Yeah.
this little bit. Trump now playing around with this Canada as the 51st state. I'm like, I don't know why
Mhm.
he's asking for all of Canada. It's like, that's just a bigger headache than it's worth. I think just take Alberta and be done with it. But yeah, but on the income taxing with tariffs and all of that,
Mhm.
um, you know, what do you think should be the priority for a new federally elected government coming in? Because I ran for the People's Party of Canada. These are policies
Mhm.
that we have been speaking about for 9 years now.
Yes.
And now you're starting to see them. They've become popular, so more politicians have decided to pick them up and run with them. But
Mhm.
to your point as well, that people don't really, they're not engaged. They're not even
Mhm.
looking at who represents them. They typically tend to vote for a party, not even a person. And I've listened
Mhm.
to you as well speak to, we need some competent individuals in government. Why? Because government is a business. And
Yes.
yet you get a Carney who comes in, and now you get Trump, who all of a sudden we've got all this national pride from this post nation state that we've got,
Mhm.
coming from the liberals. Where's Team Canada? And it's like, well, I thought we were post nation state. I'm confused. But, he has taken that and he's making Trump like this devil, this evil person who's attacking Canada. And yet we've
Mhm.
got a carbon tax that's supposed
Yes.
to come into play here to the tune of another 20% April 1st. And I'm going, that is going to hit people, in especially Canadians, consumers, far harder than any tariff is going to
Mhm.
impact us. What are your thoughts around some of that?
Well, I mean, that's exactly the point. And, with Carney talking, well, I guess I back up to, what should people be looking for there? You know, there's platform versus promises. And there's been a lot of promises made, while they do their leadership race with the Liberal Party. Don't confuse a promise versus what's an actual platform. Because they talk about, I've even seen it where, they talk about eliminating the carbon tax April 1 in favor of, moving this carbon tax on industrial. Well, give me a break. I think that's even worse for Canada. It's not going to make life cheaper. It's probably going to make it more expensive. Because if you're taxing polluters, directly, I guess our industry could be considered a polluter. We have to run generators on site. We have to run this big machinery that runs off diesel to create a subdivision. And you know, what are the allowable? What's the allowable carbon output versus what do I have to buy credits for? As an example, uh, do you think we're just going to absorb those costs? No, they get handed on down to the consumer. So all you've done is move it from here directly to here indirectly. Now it's, for lack of a better term, a hidden tax, but you're still going to get taxed, and you're going to get taxed more. So what do I hope? For a new government, hopefully not a liberal government. uh, you know, yeah, I want them to take a look at all the taxation. I think it's ridiculous what we're taxed for in this country. The carbon tax being the top of the list, but review that goddamn tax act. It has not been looked at for a number of years, and for all the layers, and I talk about bad policy on top of worse policy, there's the prime example there. Review the tax act. It is so confusing that even some of the professional accountants we use for our organization are sitting there scratching their heads saying, I can't tell you. That's pretty sad when some of the smartest people around can't tell you what you're being taxed on or how CRA would look at it.
Well,
Now
CRA
imagine that.
themselves don't know how they would look at it in some
No,
cases. They are just
no.
as confused.
I think, yeah, they're definitely confused. They're overstaffed too. But, at the same time, you just kind of sit there and shake your head like, this is supposed to be relatively easy, and it's not. It's confusing even for the experts. So I can't imagine what an individual is going through as they try and file their taxes, and look for write-offs, and they could be breaking the law and they don't even know they're breaking the law. So that to me is the first place that you start. And I've picked on that in a number of different angles, even for housing. Where you sit there and say, well, we've got the Housing Accelerator Fund, we got this fund, we're doing this to make owning a home easier for Canadians. You want to know how you make it easier? Don't tax them as much. Why are you using taxpayer dollars to subsidize this over here and that over there? That is absolutely ridiculous. All that does is create government bloat and even more red tape for people to get through. So it baffles me. I can't stand it. So obviously the number one on my list is take a look at the Tax Act, get rid of some of these taxes, and like, I don't want to paraphrase here, but I mean, put more money back in Canadians' pockets. It's a very true statement. For God's sakes, people need to live.
Yeah, so on that note, let's turn it a little bit to our provincial politics because,
Hmm.
the premier that we have today, and as good a job as she may be doing in some areas, I think has really fallen short in others, including
Hmm.
the promised tax cuts.
Hmm.
And I'm a big advocate of smaller government, and she made government
Hmm.
bigger. So her and I kind of got at odds right from the get-go. She came in, and the people who I thought should have been escorted out the front door were invited in, into cabinet positions and other positions
Hmm.
of authority, but promises made that just haven't been kept. One of them, obviously, being taxes. And you building homes, I mean, you understand, especially when you talk about affordability of housing.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
my husband works in development as well. And, I've often said this numerous times. If you want to make housing more affordable,
Hmm.
get government out of the way. Like remove them,
Oh,
get them out of the way. The permits, the costs, the studies, the consultations, all of these things that literally just drip on people. And I've said it to the tune of about you could maybe, reduce the price of a home by 40% just by removing government bloat bureaucracy, as you've said.
you could likely get close to that here in Alberta. I guess I just go back to lived experience, and I'll use multifamily housing as an example. If I go back to when I started my career, it wasn't that common. Single family housing was probably worth about 85% of what we built in the city of Calgary, and multifamily was fairly limited, but the affordability was there. But to submit a plan for multifamily development and have that first shovel in the ground was anywhere from 6 to 8 months. Now it could be 2 years or longer. So you wonder what's happening to affordability? To your point, all those different studies, all the like we're pissing around with trying to make sure that all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, and for what? It doesn't build a better product. It just stretches out the timeline. It stretches out the cost to build, and the only people who are paying for it at the end of the day are the end users, the end consumers, and that's not fair. That's not fair that governments injected themselves in the way to the point where you need three times as many people in planning as what you had 35 years ago. We're only building the same amount that was that we were building back then. So why do you need three times as many people? Why do you need all these processes that create just a bunch of red tape and honestly for nothing?
Well, we see that with the Liberal government in particular, and the hiring of
Hmm.
what, almost 100,000 people over there, the last decade here that they've been in power. Government just continues to grow, which is
Sure.
coming back, keeping it on the provincial side was why I was so disappointed when Danielle Smith was elected, because, she's supposed to be this more libertarian, even not even conservative, but more
Yeah.
libertarian conservative, where, it is about smaller government, allow the private sector to do what the private sector can do,
Hmm.
because they are more efficient, more effective. Why? Because they're more accountable. Government is just not accountable, right? We have no means as the taxpayer, it seems today, to hold our government accountable. And that's become evident in the fact that, to the little poll that was done, 93% of Canadians want to see an election, and yet what? No election is called, right?
Hmm.
So provincially, then let's take a look at some of the things that maybe we can be done, because obviously, one of my frustrations as well has been with this net zero. And now I know where you stand on the climate change. It drives me crazy. And I
Yeah.
read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's book, The Gulag Archipelago, and my real big takeaway from that monster book, I know you like to read as well, was do not partake in the lie. And here we have our premier who didn't come out and say this is, false information, this is just a narrative, it's propaganda. She came out and said
Hmm.
instead of net 2030, we're going to talk about net 2050, which is propagating the lie.
Hmm.
And you seem to have a real good firm grip on, what an MLA's responsibility should be. And I find today our MLAs, they're whipped. So they don't have an opinion. They don't get to voice an opinion or a concern, or represent their clients, which are us, the people. They have
Yeah.
to toe the party line. How do we change that?
I don't know if you can ever change it.
Oh,
I guess
don't tell me that.
my quick my quick overview of government and then politicians is it's nothing but trading favors, and giving into the base. And I think there may even be a bit of a fear here in Alberta because we've had an NDP government once, and what a travesty. Uh, that we've got to try and keep everyone happy rather than keeping the majority happy. And I think that's what every government kind of falls into, or at least they get caught up in. I would like to see provincial. Well, I mean, if I had my druthers, I would roll the codes back on housing by about 15 years and start there. And largely because I'm not a big believer in net zero, I think that's just a fallacy, and it's something that you'll always move the goalposts on. We'll never achieve it. And by trying to include that into housing, I guess I asked the question: what was so wrong with it before? What was wrong with the energy efficiency that housing had then? Because the envelope has become so bloody tight that if people don't maintain their homes properly, they're not getting proper airflow. They're not seeing enough air exchanges per hour, and it creates an unhealthy home. So why do we keep pushing the codes even further? Who's doing this? Some policymaker down in Ottawa? And why are we accepting it here in Alberta? We could very well come up with our own building codes and subscribe to that. And that's where I would like to see us go, to be honest.
Ooh, that sounds a little bit like, Republic of Alberta, separatist talk there. Where do you kind of stand on that?
It's not so much separatist talk. I just don't believe that you have to follow the Ottawa example all the time. The environment's different down there. and they may have their own terms, their own beliefs. But as far as net zero goes, I mean, it's a waste of time and money. I mean, just doing a quick calculation here a while ago, it's from where we are today, it's an additional $30,000 on the cost of a home. Now, you want to take and amortize that over 25 years, you're paying $60,000 more, and for what? You're not going to save. You're not going to save any more money, or not enough money to justify that additional expense. So what are we doing? Are we doing it all to save the environment? Give me a break. I mean, how many more trips? How many more processes do you have to go through on a home? Uh, Really, I mean, you're not doing anything more for the environment. You're actually adding to the pollution in the air.
Well, that's like the
Like
whole green thing to
it's all
begin with.
ridiculous, and it's I think it's more of a feel good movement than anything, and I guess that's why I push back so hard on it at times.
Yeah, well, it's really nice to see you push back on it actually, and I really loved how you've presented it. And even when you did your little video on the liberal conversation around the home equity tax that they keep proposing, it amazes me that people don't realize that by the time they have paid their mortgage off,
Mhm.
they have literally paid 2.5 to 3 times the price
Yeah.
of the purchase price of their home. People don't get
Yes.
that. Like they don't do the math. And, as somebody who's a chartered investment manager myself, I mean, I always do the math. Numbers don't lie. I mean, you can manipulate them, yes, but they don't lie. And, then by the time, like you've calculated, like you said, your landscaping, your maintenance costs, the roof you had to replace, the windows you had to replace, and then for a liberal government to propose that we tax it's for me, even
Hmm.
with inheritance taxes and, you're passing something down to your children. If I've paid the tax on something once, why should I be taxed on it again?
Well,
Ever,
you've already paid tax on the money that you used to pay for it. You
right?
know?
And if anybody's gotten a utilities bill lately, you're getting taxed on taxes,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
And
you're
on
getting a carbon tax on top of all the other taxes that you paid. And, I mean, let's face it. I mean, even I've seen some of my bills where I'm sitting there saying, well, the goddamn carbon tax itself is 40% of my bill. Like, this is ridiculous. All because, we have natural gas in abundance in Western Canada, and they want us to use electric. Hey, we did that experiment, years ago with hot water tanks, and our supplier assured us it was cheaper, and it wasn't. It was actually 2, 3 times the cost because natural gas is available here.
Yeah, I love
It's
that how when the government promises you something's going to be cheaper, I'm like, well, if the government says one thing, usually look towards the opposite direction. It's
Mhm.
probably more truthful. And that
Oh,
experiment
sure.
has been done numerous times. Now, censorship, you have talked about, not, people how sensitive they've become and, nobody wants to offend anybody. And
Yeah.
I, a long time ago, kind of came to realize that I'm not going to please everybody, so I don't even try.
No.
It's like,
No.
and I am going to be who I am, which I think, again, I look at people's heart, and look at to common sense. But
Hmm.
we are living in a world where I find so many people are tiptoeing around each other. Oh my gosh, DEI, for example, this diversity,
Oh
equity,
God.
inclusion. I'm like, how about we just hire the most competent person, male, female, like, don't care what race, don't care what religion. Can you do the job? And are you the best person
Yeah.
to do it?
Well, that's
Trump,
what we've done for a number of years. I mean, has it hurt us in the past? I
yeah.
don't think so.
Yeah.
I
Well,
know
even
that
our
our company
immigration.
is 45 years old. We've never had a DEI policy, and if you walked up and down the halls or went out into the field, you would find we're a pretty diverse company, and we just did that naturally by hiring the most competent person for the role. So
Yeah.
I have
So
no complaints.
how is it that the government seems to think that, we have it doesn't happen naturally, that these are things that they need to manufacture, that they need to control, that they need to impose? Because that's been, I mean, I worked in aerospace and defense at a time when there was probably two women. I was one of them. But things shifted and changed, but they did it a little
Mhm.
bit organically. And that's like when people talk about women in the home, vice, women
Yes.
in the workforce. And I'm like, I just feel, I remember being one of those rah rah, yeah, if a guy could do it, a girl could do it better. And then I look back at that and I go, geez, that was really me shooting myself in the foot because I have a
Mhm.
husband now who dotes on me and I love it. I'm like, hey man, chivalry needs to come back, you know?
Sure.
It's like, why is it that we seem to think that we have to be everything, do it better? And it comes down to a little bit, I think, with this feminist movement, and now we're seeing it just again. It's one little thing at a time that seems to get picked away until it
Mhm.
becomes so blatantly obvious that, oh my Lord, what have we done? And I think we're there with this whole DEI, censorship of the media, propaganda. Um,
Woke movement. Yes. Like it's past the point of being ridiculous, to be totally honest. I always relate it back to the woke movement, and why we've got to accommodate everybody. Uh, you can't accommodate everybody. You can't run around and worry about everybody's feelings. I mean, you should be able to speak freely, and as long as you're not being an asshole, I mean, that's fine. But you can't accommodate every special interest group out there. You have to draw the line somewhere and say, if the majority are happy, let's leave it at that. That's fine. And the rest, unfortunately, they just have to deal with it.
well, let's
And
talk.
they can't. They just scream loud and get in front of those politicians that will listen to them. And it's sad because that's not what they're there to do. They're there to listen to the majority and
Well, I mean,
accommodate them.
and on that note, the majority is not always right either. Like I'm always willing to I try to listen very much to all
Mhm.
sides and then just trying to go, okay, where does it make sense? Because not everybody has all the information, which is why I think so many people have in the past relied on government because I think I think this is where most of it comes from. Most people believe that the government has more information than they do. But yeah, and I agree with you. That's totally not the
Definitely not.
case. Yeah, and I think if we had more quality and qualified MLAs and MPs, I think that might improve the situation because they would look at things from a more critical perspective, ask better questions, and then do their own research. But that's not happening, especially under the political system we have right now, where you're whipped into following, the party line. So you have a handful of people at the top that make all the decisions, form the narrative, and then you're told to go along with it. But
Yes.
um, y- you know, I'm not sure where I was going with that, but the truth of the matter is, how do we somehow get people like yourself, and this is part of today, was I wanted Albertans with opinions, that are
Mhm.
not afraid to take a stand, share with the world who they are. Conservatives tend to go, just leave me alone, right? Whereas, the progressives, the woke mob, they're like in your face, it's my way, no way, you got to agree with me. um
Yeah. Well, it's very true, isn't it? Agree with me or else.
Yeah, it is very much agree with me or else. And yet a conservative can sit there and go, okay, well, I disagree with you, but, I don't hate you because of that, right? I'm not going to disown
Mhm.
you. Although I did almost disown my brother. He was supporting Kamala Harris. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, okay, this is grounds for like a family feud. Like, stop that. But in zest, joking. But how do you deal with the woke mob?
You ignore them, you block them, you mute them. You don't have to sit there and listen to that. I mean, if they want to have a rational conversation, that's fine. I'm always up for that. But when they start hurling insults or they're coming at you from an anonymous account, I that's typically what I do. I ignore them, I mute them, or I block them. Because obviously they want to hurl insults. So it's a complete waste of time to, I mean, would in real if they were sitting in front of you in real life and they were hurling insults at you, you would turn around and walk away, because you're not going to put up with that. So why would social media be any different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know.
kind of equate them to the bully. They've just gotten away with it. And so they continue to do it. It's until they get bopped back in the nose and they realize there's a
Mhm.
consequence to their actions, that not everybody is going to tolerate it. They're really going to continue to do it.
As we're
Yeah.
seeing with some of them right now.
Yeah. So let's
They're getting bit by the exact mob that they tried to protect.
Well, that's the way
So,
socialism works, right? In communism,
mhm.
people just become literally the useful idiots for a time,
Yeah.
and then the system turns on them. And that's what,
Mhm.
I find history has failed in this country to really reflect the reality of the cost of these policies that we've been walking towards the path. And
Mhm.
now it's just a matter of extremes, right? It's like we've been on the
Yeah.
socialist path here in Canada for a very long time, but now we've just kind of gotten so far to the left where, you're starting to see the extreme results, outcomes that people are waking up to it. But yet history has recorded this, for such a long time.
Yes. And here we are, dealing with different issues that really shouldn't be a problem. I mean, again, I guess I always go back to my comment about the majority. Accommodate the majority, and you'll be fine.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
And
let's talk about Trump.
you or I may not even agree with that direction, but I mean, if we're not inside the majority, we well, maybe we deserve to lose.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I find myself outside the majority quite often, and it's that's a box I'm quite comfortable with. I've jokingly said it, but I found myself right more times than I found myself wrong out there. COVID,
Likewise.
when the government said 2 year or 2 weeks to
Hmm.
stop the spread, I laughed. I went, I know government far too well. It's like this is 2 years at least. And,
Hmm.
people were like, well, we can just stay at home. And I'm like, please don't comply because if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. But let's talk about Trump for a second.
Okay.
Are
Yeah.
you a Trump supporter?
I like some of his policies. I don't know if I totally like the man, but you know, is he annoying with the 51st state? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not. I'm still Canadian in my mind. If you had the right government, you had the right direction that we were moving in. I could be even more patriotic than before. But if you end up with the wrong government, you have to take a long, serious look at why the hell do we even stay.
So, on that, thank you for bringing that up because now I'm going to corner you a little bit. When have
That's
we ever had the right government for Alberta in Ottawa?
very
Like,
rarely. Very rarely. It always seems like we're fighting an uphill battle, and it's largely because of the oil and gas, the natural resources. And I guess I've always been of the opinion you have this. This is what we have to offer to the world. Why do we keep it in the ground? Why are we not selling it? Why are we not sharing it? I mean, the Canada itself would be tremendously wealthy, and we'd be more secure as a country as a whole.
but there's
But
no
instead,
business case for oil and gas. Mr.
I
Trudeau
have
stated that,
bullshit.
but
There's
this
no
is why
business
Trump
case. God.
Trump has signed a $1 trillion deal with Japan because there's no business
Yeah.
case for Canada to sell its oil and natural gas.
Well, this is what happens when you have a retard running your country, and he's just stuck in his own ideology that, there is no business case for anything that, any fossil fuel or any oil and gas, rather, that it's just a sickening ideology. And I honestly can't believe that, people were overwhelmed by vanity and voted for, this idiot.
Nice hair, fancy socks, and the legalization of weed. I think that was the real big one for most people for
Oh
Trudeau.
yeah, yeah. How's that working out now? Now we're legalizing more drugs, and now we have an issue with fentanyl in the country.
Oh, no, no, no. The
Unbelievable.
government doesn't believe we have an issue with fentanyl. I honestly sometimes, you have to wonder about some of these policies and why. Trump threatened tariffs, and he was very clear that this was a bit of an issue around the border. Now, I mean,
Hmm.
I know there's other stuff going on, but I think
Hmm.
in large part it does run around the concept of security, period. So the
Yes.
first thing I think that Trump was doing, you were privy to a little bit of my rant there before we started that I did yesterday about securing and securing borders. Like we don't have a military in Canada
Hmm.
capable of defending the country, the resources. We don't have a military. We don't have icebreakers. We don't have the things to defend our Arctic. The Arctic is a
Yeah.
huge issue, which I think Trump is trying to bring attention to the fact that we have this fentanyl issue. We have, terrorists crossing the regulated borders, and
Hmm.
trying to bring attention to the fact that Canada can't deal with that, let alone the bigger issues on a geopolitical scale.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, where do you think, like, some people have different opinions, different ideas. They go, Trump in the 51st state, he's just being a bully. I think it was actually a rather polite way in somewhat, there is definitely no love lost between him and Justin Trudeau, which I don't think there'd be any
Hmm.
love lost between him and Carney either. I think Carney is the global elitist,
Hmm.
that he is trying to remove from the US, and we're going to try and re-elect it here in
Yes.
Canada. Like, Lord help me, grant me patience. I got to stop saying for
Yeah.
God to grant me patience, because I think he keeps giving me more and more reasons to like be patient. It's like, okay, I
It's
want to,
true.
yeah, I want to see change happen here. So what are your thoughts around Trump and this, his tactics, not so much his tactics, but the underlying, you know, um, value that he's kind of putting behind this 51st state and securing the borders? And where do you think he's really going with that?
Well, it's that's probably the $1 trillion question, isn't it? Where is he really going with that? Well, I mean, I think he does want us to secure the borders. I mean, his job is to protect Americans, and he's made no qualms about that. I mean, Calgary, Canada, rather, is a long lost second cousin, so he doesn't care about us as much. But we have to secure our borders, and with uncontrolled immigration policy, I mean, we've let in a lot of people that obviously we shouldn't have in this country. They're protesting, what's happening on the opposite side of the world in our streets. That's ridiculous. These are not people who want to be Canadian, nor do they want to conform to it. So I mean, they can see that happening across the border, and it's concerning for them. The fact that we don't protect the Arctic, and I don't think that totally falls on a liberal government. I mean, they just continue to ignore the problem that even previous governments have ignored as well, along with our military. We've defunded the military for years, 30 plus years. We haven't protected the Arctic for 30 plus years, so it doesn't really fall to one government at that point. But at the same time, they want to make sure that that their neighbors are securing things, for the citizens of the United States. Now, who knows? Maybe the long game is he wants Western Canada right up to Alaska, and that secures the West Coast. Maybe that's the outside, game plan. Is wouldn't it be great to be the first president in the last 100 years to add to the United States and secure your energy future?
Yeah, I think it's secure. I kind of took a step back and looked at it from a bigger picture when, you know, the people see it as a kind of a quirky little threat or a joke, and I loved it when he called
Mhm.
Trudeau a governor. Personally, it was like, it was just, so funny. But I really, I would not want to see all of Canada. I think it would be detrimental to the United States actually to add
Mhm.
all of Canada. I don't think they'd ever see another Republican, um, government again, because Canada has,
Mhm.
especially in the East, become so democratic.
Yes.
In their policies and views. But on the West now is a different story. But I can see his position, especially when you include the conversation around Greenland. You can include the conversation around the Panama Canal,
Yes.
and he is looking at that securing of the United States, its people, its resources. And the last thing I think you want to see is, a communist country sitting on your largest border. Now, people think that I'm a
Mhm.
little crazy to say that, but we've already made it very clear that, Canada has been infiltrated with Chinese
Mhm.
influence and Chinese money. We have MPs who obviously hold their position thanks to, Chinese influence. And, here we are, we
Yeah.
won't even release their names. So we don't even know who these people are, who they're not. But yet, our governments have been infiltrated. The Panama
Mhm.
Canal is a perfect example of that. A critical piece of infrastructure that was turned back over to Panama.
Mhm.
But the Chinese have very much infiltrated and influenced the flow of goods, and the government there. So
Mhm.
when I look at the bigger picture, I think he truly is looking at securing the future of the
Mhm.
United States and what does that look like. And I thought he did a fairly, fun, a little bit provocative kind of job when he, made fun of Canada and Governor. But
Trudeau.
yeah. Let's talk about, just for fun, what would the advantages of, let's say, just let's talk about Alberta, because I think
Mhm.
Alberta shares more in common with our southern counterparts than we do with our eastern counterparts, here in Canada.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
just for fun, like as a business person, somebody who's been following politics, understands the economics, the business aspect of it, what would some of the big advantages of being the 51st state be?
Well, there's obviously pros and cons either way. I mean, taxation's a big one. We are heavily taxed in Canada, whereas in the U.S. they have a more simplified tax system, and that would be a huge benefit. The other benefit to the United States is obviously access to our natural resources here in Alberta, and they would tap into them. We don't seem to want to do that in this country. You don't have a border to cross. I mean, you have a state line to cross. I mean, that's another advantage where you're not dealing with with a passport. I mean, there's lots of advantages. I think, but there's also some disadvantages. Their healthcare system, whether you love it or not, is more expensive than a Canadian healthcare system. But we have our own challenges because the system in Canada hasn't evolved in a number of years, and it's falling behind, especially with the growth in population. We just don't have the people to accommodate the growth in population. So every province across the country is taxed with this. I mean, we should be looking at different models from around the world, and it's a public-private partnership. So I mean, that's a detriment if you're a part of the United States, is their system is far more expensive. You might be easier to access at times, but it's more expensive.
Yeah,
So,
but
like I said,
when we talk
pros
about
and cons either way.
yeah, when we talk about expense, especially on the healthcare side, though, I have an alternative health diploma as well, and I've looked at the
Mhm.
quality of health of the individuals, in both the United States and Canada. Money is obviously not the issue because we throw more money at healthcare, especially in this province, than any
Oh
other
yeah.
province in Canada, and we have some of the longest wait times, some of the sickest people.
Mhm.
It's embarrassing, actually. So I think it's more government policy and ideology that has held back healthcare here than dollars and cents.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. Although I've had some experiences in the healthcare system that I haven't been disappointed in, but I agree with you on the wait times because there's one special procedure I'm waiting for, and I've got I think 18 months to go. So are we better off in some regards? Yes. In some regards, no.
Well, I laugh at the people who, especially the NDP, that are constantly fighting this private health, and implementing more private clinics. If people can afford to pay for it, why
Hmm.
not let them? They're like, well, they're jumping the queue. It's like, well, no, you're not jumping the queue. You just happen to be in a position where you can pay for it. And what they fail to realize is that you have just freed up a spot for the person behind you
Exactly.
to become, one spot closer. And now if we did that in
Hmm.
Alberta, which tends to be a very wealthy province, I think we would have, clear up those wait times in a big hurry. Right? Because I think there would be people who went, hey, my health is a priority. And it's not even about
Hmm.
the dollars and cents of whether or not you make 200,000 or 100,000. It's what you put as a priority. Somebody
Yes.
who values their health would make it a priority, to maybe pay for it themselves.
For one, it already exists in Canada. So I
Hmm.
don't know where this story comes from that, oh, we don't want private healthcare. It already exists. And actually, Alberta is one of the provinces that are furthest behind. And I can only assume it's because of how strong the unions are here. But, well, I mean, one great example I have is a former colleague of mine, who went into semi-retirement mode, and him and his wife love hiking trails in various different countries. She needed a hip replacement. She was looking at a 2-year waiting list. And, well, I mean, that just didn't fit with their plans. So you talk about what are their priorities? Well, she ended up going over to Europe and getting a hip replacement so they could finally start enjoying this semi retirement plan rather than waiting 2 years for surgery in Canada. What did that do? To your point, yes, it took her name off the waiting list here and freed up the space for someone else. But that was their priority and that was out of pocket for them. How does that offend anybody? I don't understand it. But wouldn't it be great to have that option here in Canada rather than, taking $13,000 and giving it to another European country because they have availability or they have a private system available? I don't know. I don't know. It's the bullshit baffles brains comment.
Bullshit
Really it is.
baffles brains. I like that.
Bullshit baffles brains. Like, let's spend it in Canada as opposed to spending it somewhere else.
Well, that's just it, right? I mean, the money stays here from an economic and
Hmm.
business perspective. It employs more people, all these people.
Yeah.
And I laugh at it because it's, the nurses and the doctors and all these unions that oppose it. And I'm going, well, wait a minute, that's called job security. It's like
Hmm.
you will have an increase, in business, I think personally. And I think personally, private sector tends to treat their people very well. But it goes, I think, to show a
Hmm.
little bit of the rot that occurs when people get into these unions because there's this self-entitled, I'm entitled to my time off, my this. They feel they're overworked. And then they get out into the real world and then they're like, oh, good Lord. Like, wow, I
Yeah.
had no idea how good I had it. Right. But it's
Yes.
just if they think somebody is getting like even just a little bit up on them, it's like I call it, it's okay. I always tell people it's okay to be jealous because if you're jealous, it's like, oh my God, like that beard, like where did you get that cut? That's just, oh Lord, I need to know, right? You're asking questions,
Yes.
you're curious, like you want it, but not at the self-destruction of somebody. Envy is a different story though.
Mhm.
And I see so much envy on the left and in the woke and in these unions and in this philosophy around, when I hear about the healthcare in Canada, I go, that's the envy speaking. Heaven forbid somebody doesn't have to wait as long and endure the same misery I do.
Yes. I concur.
Yeah. All right. Lots of broken things. What are some of the solutions? I keep
Well,
telling,
I mean,
everyone keeps
I
telling,
think
keep
that's
pointing out
always
all the
the thing
obvious
is,
broken
it's easy enough
things.
to complain about it, but what are the solutions to it? Well, healthcare, I mean, the solution is, take a look at the best models around the world and accept the fact that it's a public-private partnership. Let's update the Canadian healthcare system. Let's move up the ranks from 12th or 15th, depending on what chart we're on, and let's get back up in the top five for crying out loud. Rather than as you said, you're just constantly throwing money at this thing and with no improvements. How do you improve the tax situation here in Canada? Crack open the tax act. Let's take a long, hard look at what makes sense, and let's refine this thing so it's easier for people to understand and it's easier to collect. And you're probably going to find that you don't need as many people to administer it at the end of the day. Along the lines of what you had mentioned earlier on about smaller government. Yes, let's have a smaller government. Why do we add 100,000 people? I mean, we're the worst in the G7 for all of this. So let's crack it open. Let's reduce some of the dependency on government, but let's reduce the amount of government jobs as well. Let's get back out into the private sector and let that support it and pay tax on that instead. A couple of hard solutions there, but I know it offends some people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, and even on the provincial side, the solution is the same. One of the
Mhm,
probably the saddest things I ever did was got involved provincially in politics because I really liked being able to look at the East Coast in Ottawa and go, they're the problem.
mhm.
But when I got into the provincial politics, I went, oh my Lord, like, wow, do we ever have problems here? Um, Healthcare is
It's all
provincial.
over, Nadine. It's
Oh,
all over.
yeah, the municipalities are the same way. They're infiltrated with a lot of these UN agendas and ideas and ideology and the woke and the DEI and ESG. It's just so embedded in everything that, it is. I'm not sure how we shake that tree to kind of get all that stuff out anymore, but there is
Well, I
solutions.
mean, you need. I'm going to say this. You need a version of Trump. You need somebody to go in there and say, "I don't give a shit if I've only got 4 years to make a change, and I'm not going to get reelected. I'm going in to hammer out a change, and I don't care who I offend."
Oh, I love
That
that.
that's about the only solution out there.
Yeah, and so, I came up against this and just out of curiosity for fun,
Mhm,
I was pretty hard on Danielle, especially leading up to the AGM, trying to point out the things that should have been done, in my opinion, that didn't get done, or promises made
mhm,
that were not kept. And, your comment there about, coming in, shake it up, get it done. Who? Because I people used to say to me, Nadine, I don't disagree with you, but if not Danielle, then who? Is there a Shane
mhm,
Wenzel out there, as a who that could come in and potentially shake things up and, throw caution to the wind and say this needs to be fixed and it just needs to be fixed. And I'm not a politician and I don't care who I offend along the way. I've got 4 years. Let's
mhm.
get it done. Who in this, like, because I mean, I look at just even Alberta, like Canada, okay, bigger problems,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
dealing with, different from east to west, the ideologies and are very different. The people are very different. But here, just in
Mhm,
Alberta, like who? We get all these great business people. I know many of them, but you talk politics to them and they're like, hell no, off the charts, not happening. They want no part of it up front, but they're happy to do stuff behind the scenes.
mhm. Yeah, I couldn't name an individual for you, unfortunately, but that's the type. That's one major characteristic that they have to have is they don't care. But I guess to that point, you need to change the system as well. Term limits, 2 terms, and certainly no pensions. Absolutely no pensions, because that's what you see some of these politicians going for, especially at the municipal level. They want that full pension, and they'll sit there and they'll occupy a seat for 3, 4 terms just to achieve that. I mean, how insulting is that? But you could probably get a better person to run municipally, as an example, if you doubled the pay and got rid of the pension. And I know I've had debates with this with some people in the media, and they get right upset with me about it. But I'm sitting there saying, why would you not pay your municipal politicians twice as much, which would put them well over $200,000 a year? Take away that pension, tell them they've only got 2 terms. You might get a better quality person to run for that role. Because let's face it, take a look at Calgary's council right now. Uh, for most of them, this is a pay raise, but they have their fingers in a $4 billion pot every year. Well, I mean, for $4 billion, I think I want the smartest people around the table. You know? And I want them out there making changes. I don't want them bamboozled by the bureaucracy at City Hall. I want them to sit there and make hard decisions and fire people who aren't.
Yeah, because I agree with that actually. I'm glad you're the only other person I've ever heard say pay politicians more other than myself. And I've been very
Yeah,
supportive of pay them to do the job. Right?
yeah,
And I agree. Term limits are essential. There should be no career in politics. It is
no,
public service, not
yes,
the other way around. And I think it's better alignment if you pay somebody to do the job, especially if
hmm,
your reelection depends upon the decisions that you've made and the quality of the job that you've done. Now you can be held accountable. Now you could risk losing your job of
hmm,
250,000 a year if you've done a bad job, whereas you can kind of coast, along.
Yep.
Don't upset anybody if, you're counting on that pension and you just go, I just got to get reelected. Right.
Well,
So I think there's better alignment there with paying people more. And I see it even here, people who do the town council part time, but
mhm,
yet we pay a CAO, two, $300,000 a year for a little tiny uh, city, town like
mhm,
Cochrane. And yet our mayor makes one third of that. And I'm
mhm,
like, well, who's running the province? Who's running the municipality? It sure as hell not the mayor,
mhm.
right?
Not the
And
person you elected. Eh? Isn't that sad?
isn't that sad? So thank you for saying that, because
Mhm,
I think we have to get back to electing the right people who
mhm.
can read a balance sheet, an income statement, and understand what expenses cost,
Yes.
um, and get away from the bureaucracy, because this is, I think, what happens too is so many of these little towns and the province have this big bureaucracy. And even if you
Mhm,
get a good council member or a good MP or even a good mayor, whatever, they can't make the change because they get stalemated, they get blocked by
mhm.
the bureaucracy itself. But why is it that these politicians are afraid to fire people? Like, you talked about firing people in one of your videos. It's like,
Mhm.
how come these guys just can't go in and say, you know what? We need to cut the chaff here, and unfortunately, there's budget cuts that need to be made. We got to look at every
Mhm.
division, and you're fired, right?
Still comes down to the quality of individual. Again, for most of them, this is a pay raise. Or in your case, like you mentioned, it's a part-time job. So why would you want to rock the boat? You want that extra income coming in. You want that pension. And that's fundamentally what's flawed with the system. You need smarter people in those roles. You need people who uh, have even a background in not only life, but in business. Doesn't even matter if they have their post-secondary education. It just matters to me that they have that life experience and that background in businesses.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. I did try. I did my part here for the last 6, 7 years. Even down, like I said, provincially, made the effort. I thought things would
Mhm,
be different under Danielle, only to get disqualified for all the things we talked about today.
mhm,
It's like, so it always makes me wonder, how do we attract those good people when those good people really don't have a chance of even getting in? Because it
mhm.
is a party system, and we do have to look at evaluating individuals, and
Yes.
look at the resume, right? It is a job. Trudeau was not qualified to run the biggest business in our country. That's our government,
Oh God, no.
right?
Uh,
So
I think I beat the hell out of that one, but yeah, I mean, totally unqualified for it. Yeah, got in on name alone, and look at the devastation that we've dealt with for 9.5 years.
yeah, we pay the price.
It's yeah, it's almost like you need a report card, and if they don't fulfill their promises, then they're automatically disqualified from the next race.
Now, see, I proposed that at the last UCP AGM. It didn't go over very popular. People had a lot of excuses.
Hmm.
This is what people are really good at. They made a lot of excuses for well, there's only so much you can do. Oh, you don't want to upset the apple cart. Oh, well, we don't want the NDP to get reelected. But I
Yeah.
think, you're right. There should be a report card, and there should be a limited amount of time. And my proposal was that, if you hadn't fulfilled your campaign promises, and that's all I was
Yeah.
looking, your campaign promises, if you had said you were going to cut tax and you didn't, within two
Hmm.
years of having been elected, is like, you know what, automatic. And I said leadership review. So it
Hmm.
gave people an opportunity to say, okay, is this acceptable or not acceptable? Didn't mean the leader was gone, right? It just meant
Yeah.
acceptable or not acceptable, right? And then, but yeah, lots of things that we can talk about. Anyway, I hope today people realize that maybe I'm not the madman that everybody sometimes makes me out to be. I have fellow companions that fit into that category. But it is refreshing to see somebody, especially of your prominence in business and in the community, that is willing to actually speak your mind, share an opinion, be open to a different opinion, willing to have the conversation, because that to
Mhm.
me is that's politics. That's what it should be. Let's get to the best solution. And sometimes the best solution is talking to people who we don't necessarily agree with, see things from different
Yes.
perspective, but get in the room, let's have the conversation. And I've just seen that shut down so many times. So it's been rather refreshing. Do you have any last words for any of the viewers that are listening today? I get accused all the time, like I said, of the problems and never solutions. So hopefully we kind of did talk. Not that implementing any of these would be easy, but they're
Hmm.
not they're not hard solutions to see. They're just hard to implement, right?
That's the biggest challenge. I mean, if there's any parting words, I mean, I always complain that people don't get involved. They make that decision 5 minutes before they hit the ballot box, or they take a 5-word headline as gospel, or get involved, spend a little bit of time on it. You can't sit there and complain that you have less money to spend than you did before, and not try and understand what the issue is. So people need to spend more time on that, municipally, provincially, federally. you know I would, and dig deep and find out what the answers are. God, we went to war for this. you know so I guess that's a parting comment that I would leave with people: get involved.
Wonderful, wonderful. So there you have it, everybody. Shane Wenzel, Shane Holmes, an Albertan with an opinion. And if you like these videos, you want to see more people, their voices, their opinions heard, please do like, share. Please do send this around to friends, family members. And I want to take the time to really thank the people who do take the opportunity to let their voices be known and are not afraid to speak out. Because I'll tell you, it's a rare thing today. More and more, we're seeing that shift and change, but it's still not very commonplace. So thank you, Shane, so much for spending almost, well, over an hour with us today. And
Yeah.
I'm
That's
sure we
my
could go
pleasure,
longer,
Nadine, and
but
thank you
I
for having me
promise
on.
I won't keep you all day.
Well, you haven't. It's been a great conversation.
Wonderful. Well, I hope we do it again. And who knows, maybe we'll get together and I can come into your studio and we'll chat there.
Sounds like a plan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shane.
Okay, Nadine, thank you again.